Cool. And so what I hear you saying is like we're going back to our roots. We've always used this. This is like in our DNA of using plants as medicine. And you said 80% of the world is using plants as medicine. Is there some like is it mostly, I guess it's not a lot in the US, maybe I'm just guessing, but like what are some plants that we use as medicine every day that maybe people use and aren't aware of? Like is some in some cases is it really like we're using it, but we don't even realize it. What are some of those?
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, so that, and those statistics I was just mentioning, 80% of the world, that comes from the World Health Organization. And a lot of it is based on necessity, frankly. I mean, there's a lot of it is like, certain, it's certainly about tradition and passing down what works generation to generation, but it's also based on necessity because plants are inexpensive, they're accessible, they're and they work, that's the main thing, but the idea here is like that what you were just bringing up is very interesting because again, it's another big theme of the book is like what's hidden in plain sight. That is actually a medicinal plant that has made it through the kind of gauntlet of Western culture, you could say, um, and it's still used, but we don't really recognize what its medicinal value would be. And I often use, I think in the beginning of the book, I started off with black pepper as a very simple example. I mean, black pepper is available on every table in the world, pretty much. It's like I make a joke in the book that it's like probably on the International Space Station. It's on, every airline flight. You can get black pepper, but if you start looking into it, and this is again where ethnobotany comes in, you start looking into where does black pepper come from, and what is it? And it's a climbing vine that climbs up trees in tropical forests, originating from Southeast Asia. All over India is a big place where it grows. Now in Central and South America, it grows there too. It's pretty much anywhere where there's in the tropics. But it was used and traded as a spice for its flavor and its like ability to make bland food taste good. But that's one reason. The other reason it was like very powerful very powerful antimicrobial components in black pepper, which was very important in days before refrigeration and when there was more communicable diseases going around, foodborne illnesses, things that were like the result of food hanging around too long. And then on top of that, when science starts to look into black pepper, so many antioxidants in there, tremendously anti-inflammatory. It has components in it that improve circulation to the digestive tract. I mean, the spiciness and the flavor of black pepper, obviously we recognize on our tongue as pungency and spiciness, but what that is doing on our tongue, it's also doing throughout our whole GI tract. It's stimulating circulation and nerve current to the organs of digestion. That accelerates and improves and enhances the absorption of nutrients, the absorption of vitamins, and so on. So I could go on about black pepper. It has cognitive enhancing functions. I mean, the litany of things that it can help with are sort of like extensive, and yet we're consuming it every day. We're not necessarily aware of that. Most people just think of it as a flavor enhancer. So there's a lot of things like that. Chamomile might be another one. Chamomile is something that is widely available. You can get it at like a Denny's or like an IHOP or something like that. You can get chamomile anywhere. At most restaurants and stores, it's always available. We think of it as kind of a gentle, simple thing that maybe tastes good and has a mild calming effect, and those are all true. But the idea being that it can also be used as a medicine if we use these things continuously, consistently, in regular doses throughout our lives. Their benefits start to accumulate and aggregate and add up. So what might be a nice cup of tea after a meal one day, fine. But if you consume that chamomile as a habit, as part of your self-care routine and ritual on a regular basis, it starts to become very potent as an anti-inflammatory for the gut, as a relaxant for the nerves that line the gut. So it's calmative to the whole nervous system. It's like these things, it's part of what I'm getting at is that some of these medicinal plants that are just sitting in our spice rack or on our kitchen table or in our cupboard, part of it is about how we use them and like how we apply them and at what dosage and what frequency that turns them into medicine, rather than something that might just be something to adorn a meal or just a kind of a ritual here and there for the flavor or whatever.
Yeah. And I think people listening are probably thinking about the pepper shaker in their home even differently. Or I think of chamomile tea as something just like to help us relax and fall asleep. And so that perfectly answered my question, because I figured there were certain things that we were all already like in our programming using, that now that we know, we might see that differently and have a different intention and awareness when utilizing that in our, yeah, in our daily lives.
I'll say one more thing about that real
Yeah.
quick. Just that, I often talk about like, because a lot of people want to know what's the simplest way to get started, and I just often talk about like most people have spices in their cupboard or they have a spice rack, and spices, cinnamon, fennel, ginger, cumin, coriander, garlic, turmeric. These are incredibly powerful medicines actually to use. It's like the centerpiece of our kitchen is this like healing rack full of these amazing spices coming from all over the world. And I say that because a lot of people's health issues really begin and end in the gut. In Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine, we say that the gut is the, sort of the origin point of 80% of chronic disease for one reason or another. And which is extensive. I can get into that. But the point being that things that we can use on a daily basis, these medicinal plants they're like the plants we eat and consume on a regular basis, vegetables, fruits, seeds, nuts, the things that are, they're like that, but they exist on like the far end of the spectrum of plants, in the sense that they contain phytochemicals and compounds that in abundance, in concentrated amounts, that are not in our vegetables and our fruits in those kinds of concentrations. So they're not meant to be something that you wouldn't have a big bowl full of turmeric for breakfast. It's like they're meant to adorn our meals and be supplemental in our meals. But without them, our meals are incomplete, because you're not getting this higher end of the spectrum of potent antioxidants and really important compounds that synergize and catalyze all kinds of important functions, foundational functions, such as digestion. You know, um, when we consume a spice, again, this circulatory increase that goes, basically through the digestive system, it's allowing all the different secretions of acids and enzymes and hormones that are involved in digestion to work more efficiently. And who couldn't use a boost to their digestive function? And it's very simple, for pennies a day with the spice rack. And that's what most every traditional cuisine is made of. If you think about what makes up a cuisine, like, food from the Mediterranean, we start thinking about oregano and rosemary and garlic and basil. And when we think about, Southeast Asian, we might think of Thai basil and galangal and ginger and curries in India. And it's those spices, those culinary spices, that really make the cuisine medicinal, healing as we're just living.
Yeah,
So
and I
it's
think we probably think that those herbs and spices are there to enhance the flavor of the food without thinking about what's happening after we chew and swallow them. And like you mentioned, digestion, which is, yeah, something I think we can all use a little help with for sure.
yeah.